Well, hey there, Carly. Thank you so much for being here today for
My
us with the
pleasure.
Confident Sober Women podcast. I'm so excited to share you and your story with the audience. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you, let you share a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to chat.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me, Shelby. I love to talk openly and candidly about my journey through addiction and mental health struggles, which all kind of came to light once I gave up the drugs and alcohol. Go figure. So, I have a memoir coming out that kind of details my recovery adventures on March 10th, 2026. And it's called I'll Try Anything Twice Misadventures of a Self Medicated Life. Early readers have been describing it as eat, pray, love gone horribly wrong because I quit my job, moved to the middle of the jungle to try to find myself. And instead, I found myself deeply depressed and suicidal in a moldy tent. And I ended up finding help where I least expected it when I came back home to San Francisco. So the book covers all my different kind of crazy things I tried to treat the depression, in addition to these travel adventures that I was on, in addition to a lot on modern communal living. So I hope that the adventurous spirit is captured as much as the sort of mental health and sobriety takeaways.
Oh, I'm sure it will be. I love the title. I
So,
love, we chuckle at these things, sitting here today with I'm not sure when you got sober, but some length of time and when
mm,
we look back, we can make light, and
exactly.
sometimes it seems silly. I don't know if you got sober in the rooms of AA. I know I did, and that was a long time ago. And there was a lot of people laughing about a lot of things that were really horrible, and
Mm,
I'd be like, oh my gosh, why are they laughing? But because today we can, today we
right.
get to laugh, we get to make light of our own, transgressions, as horrible as sometimes they are. So that's where the little chuckles come from, and how come we can sit here today and have titles like that, right? And have descriptions about our story be so with so much levity, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I talk about levity is so important. I mean, I make like kind of like little side comments about the suicidal ideations I had, and I just kind of drop it into conversation as a way to destigmatize such an uncomfortable topic. Sometimes it makes people really uncomfortable. Sometimes they ask me if I'm okay. The answer is yes, I'm okay. I also just want to make sure people feel okay talking about this
mhm.
because it has been such a forbidden issue. I mean, addiction and mental illness is kind of more in the mainstream, but I think suicide in particular is still such a scary thing for people to broach. And yet, when you bring it up, everyone either loves someone who has struggled with these thoughts or has struggled with them themselves. And so I think that there should be more discourse and it should be funny and light when it can be. And yeah, to answer your questions, I got sober in 2018 in October, and I was deeply involved with 12 step. So one of the things I loved when I first started going to meetings was just how there was no bullshitting. It was like cut to the chase, let's talk about our trauma. Let's be funny about it. There was no small talk. And it was like the best party in town, as far as I'm concerned, because it wasn't, dumb, light small talk. It was let's learn who we really are without any of the niceties.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that the levity is so critical. I know for me, like humor and I guess sarcasm is a coping skill in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways. And I think that can be very dangerous. Like, as a therapist, we do want to like look at things like that, like, oh, are you just avoiding something? Or oh, what kind of unhealed trauma do you have? And maybe, but it also might just be like your way of getting through life, because let's face it, life for everybody is very uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, and so where we can bring some light, and some humor. Yes, I do think that it's hard for some people, particularly people who do not have the experience level that we do with an addiction lifestyle, with a
Mm-hmm.
mental health history. So they don't understand how you could be like, it's uncomfortable, like, oh, like you shouldn't make fun of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very serious, and I would never want to take the seriousness away, but I do think that when we can be funny, humor can be a wonderful tool because smiling and also laughing is really good for your nervous system.
Mhm.
Like that is something that's going to destimulate your parasympathetic nervous system and bring down the activation in your body.
Yeah.
When they said things in meetings like, I loved when the old timers would talk about like, what do you say when people are like, oh, like here's why aren't you drinking? Or like have this, whatever. And they would say things like, oh, I would, but I'd probably break out in handcuffs, and I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my God. Like to me, I'm just like, that's hilarious. I'm sorry. Like
Mhm.
it just is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you hear about turning tricks on the street, you hear about being
I
under a
mean,
bridge. I'm like, "Let's go, let's
I
laugh."
know.
Especially nowadays, I mean, I think my core value is that if you don't make ample space for laughter, levity, joy, music, I mean, we don't have a fighting chance as a species otherwise, whether you're sober or not.
You're so right. And with all the just kind of I feel like everybody's very angry.
Yeah,
I know you live in California, right? And so
I
I
do,
don't know
yeah.
what it's like out there. I'm across the country in Maryland, and it's just very angry,
Mhm,
tense and like, oh,
mhm,
and I kind of just feel like that is just so things and be, that we want to march for, and we can be very passionate about a lot of things, but we also don't need to be at any like huge level of seriousness. I love the people I'm seeing now. I don't know about you who are making reels about. I see this one guy sometimes, and he'll say things like, I don't care about this, or I don't care that this is happening, or I don't care about this. And first you're kind of like, damn, like but what he's saying is I don't, because there's nothing I can do about it. Like it's
mm,
probably still going to keep happening if
mhm,
little old me takes a stand on
mhm,
Facebook, or if I, speak out or show up at I don't know, a protest or something. I don't know. Like that thing is still going to go on. And so like I'm just going to worry about like or care about, like my family, or
mhm,
like my job, doing my job really well, or showing up and making sure I feed myself properly, and I'm like, yeah, I think he's onto something there.
yeah, self-care comes first. I mean, there's definitely a certain helplessness right now, and I have my own opinions about armchair activism on social media. I think how you show up in your own community is so much more important than resharing certain memes, but, everyone's coping the way they can.
Right. Right. And that's true. And it's okay. It's okay. And my way isn't the best way and yours isn't either. And that's fine. Like and I'm fine with that. I don't, if you don't like my way, that's totally cool too. I'm fine with that. I get it. We're not for everybody. And that's
Mhm.
like such an emotionally sober thing to say and to feel and believe, is like, I'm not for everybody. And I know
Right.
that that is a big part of my story for sure. Like realizing, especially in my younger years, that like trying so hard to be friends with these
Mm,
girls, the beautiful people at my gym, and the ones with the kids that had perfect clothes and the lipstick and the matching stuff, and I just wanted so badly to be, their friend, and like they didn't want me. They didn't
mm,
want me to be there. Like they just didn't really want me that badly in their group. And so I finally like had like a moment of clarity, right? And I was like, they're for someone else,
yeah.
They're not bad people. They're just not
Mhm.
for me. And that was okay.
That's actually my New Year's resolution, is to be less of a people pleaser, because at age 40, I still struggle with it. I still want everyone to like me. I think that releasing a book is sort of like a double diamond version, a grand shove into learning how to not be a people pleaser, because not everyone's going to like the book. I got my first review that was not, fully gushing recently. And it's like, all right, got to brush it off. This, if I help one person, then it's worth it, even if I'm not for everyone. And that's, it's a lot easier said than done, but it's a lifelong practice. And I think emotional sobriety is a really strong way of putting it, is, you don't have to be everyone's favorite person in order to live according to your own truth.
Yeah, and I was told a long time ago, and something I cling to and say very, very often in my practice, that other people's opinion about us are none of our business. And
Mm,
I heard that and did not understand it for a long time. And I frankly was a little bit like upset by that. Like, what do you mean? But I'm like, it makes perfect sense. Like, we're going to talk about other people in our life too. Like, I talk about my friends or my family or my kid or whatever. And like, you do too. And like, it doesn't mean that we're bad or not, but like, my opinion about you is really none of your business. Like you have to go about your life and do your
mm,
thing that's good for you. But the people pleasing stuff gets so much better in this decade for you. Like, I mean, in
mm.
my opinion,
Great. Can't wait. It seems like everything gets better the older you get. Nobody
yeah,
tells you this, because our culture is so obsessed with youth and Botox and remaining looking young. And
yeah,
the older I get, the better it's gotten. Like, bar none. I do not look back on my teenage years wistfully and fondly for the good old days. I have been looking forward because it's ever since getting sober, especially, it's like, yeah, the wisdom accumulation, it just gets better and better and better. So thank you for saying that. I'm looking forward to no longer people
Yeah.
pleasing.
Well, I'm 10 years ahead of you, and it was definitely at 40, 38-ish when I was like, huh, I really just don't care what people think anymore. And it just
Right.
got better in my 40s. And then now I'm just like, damn, I have arrived. So anyway, back to your story. I'd love for you to just share maybe like a little bit of kind of maybe you don't have to get into a whole drunk log or whatever, or what it was like, but kind of like what happened, like kind of how did you land in towards the end of your drinking and like decide to become a sober person, and then what did you do, and how'd you get here?
Totally. It's so funny to say not a long drunk-a-log because I remember my first share. It's the meeting had a policy that you had to be at least 6 months. And on my 6 month anniversary, I did a share, and it was like 20 minutes of rambling about all of my shenanigans until the time was up and I hadn't even gotten to getting sober yet. So I will do my best not to take your listeners through a very boring account of me being a hot mess. But kind of in broad strokes, I think for me, depression and addiction always went hand in hand. I drank and used drugs. I actually did more drugs more than drinking was my problem. And I did that to escape hating myself, basically. It's kind of a tale as old as time in sobriety communities, but really it was depression that had me paralyzed. And, for parts of my 20s and early 30s, it was livable, and other parts it got really, really bad. But I was always looking forward to my next party as a way to escape the sort of hell going on in my mind. And I've also always been a pretty adventurous person. So this involved like a pretty fast paced career in journalism and then burnout at age 30, in which I moved first to Mexico, then to Panama. I've always loved sort of communal type environments. I was really into summer camp as a kid. I went to all girls boarding school. I was in a sorority. So, of course, why not join a jungle commune that might or might not have been a cult? And that's where my drug addiction got really, really bad. And so I ended up kind of hitting a version of rock bottom down there, and moving back to the States. I moved to San Francisco, where I live now and where I was born and where I spent much of the early parts of my adult life. And it still took 2 years before the sobriety turning point. I mean, I ended up with a job in big tech. I was kind of faking it, all kind of working according to my bare minimum skill set, and still just miserable inside, and still partying as much as I could to escape from that. And so I think it took me so long to get sober because two reasons. One, I never considered myself an addict because my behavior did not look like the way we portray addicts in our society. I was not, using needles. I was not hiding liquor bottles under the sink. I was just partying really hard on the weekends. And I considered myself like a fun party girl, even though I wasn't getting any younger. And the problem was the aftermath of all of that sort of bender behavior was so much worse than any highs I had while I was, quote unquote, enjoying myself. And I think the second reason it took so long was because the denial was so strong. I just did not want to believe that the one thing that was giving me any form of relief was also the one thing that was keeping me from fundamentally getting well for good. And so I think my turning point, rock bottom, if you will, was almost kind of random. It was just like one bender too many. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was lying in bed. I write about this in my book, just horribly hungover, only wanting to do whippets. I don't know if you know what whippets are. It's like a nitrous oxide hits. It's
Oh.
disgusting. It's like a dumb thing that, people do in social settings and like the festival scene.
Hmm.
And or like if you ever see them sell balloons outside of like a Grateful Dead cover band concert. And I was just doing this alone in my bed, feeling so pathetic. I'm thinking, I don't remember the last time I had a Sunday where I could like go for a walk or get some ice cream or go shopping or see my friends. It's every Sunday is just this horrible languishing in bed, full of anxiety and full of self-hate. And I had this fleeting thought that almost seemed like just a random exaggeration. I was like, I need to go to rehab. And then the thought lingered a little bit longer. And then I went to see my therapist on Monday, to whom I had been lying profusely about any of my partying behavior. You know, I dropped in that I drank sometimes, but I think the more I lied to her about it, the more I withheld information from her, the more I believed myself that I didn't have a problem. I wonder if you see that in your own therapy practice. And so I just let it all come gushing out and was like, this is, and then I said, but I'm not an addict. So it's not like I need rehab or anything. And she was the one who told me this sort of revelatory truth that addiction doesn't have to look like how you see it in the movies. Addiction can be an inability to stop a bender. Addiction can be you drink once a month, but it's extremely problematic. Addiction can be you repeat these cycles that hold you in your mental illness. And she said, what I think you need is a full life intervention. So I ended up enrolling in residential rehab. I kind of thought of it as yet another thing because I had tried so many things at that point to treat my depression that didn't work. So I'm like, yeah, I'll go to rehab. I guess I'll learn how to be more manageable with my drinking. I'll cut out the hard drugs. I'll never give up weed. Weed is a creativity tool. And it was just astounding, like a week or so into rehab, feeling good without drugs and alcohol. It was like a feeling I had never experienced before. And the sense of community was really strong there. It was really amazing being surrounded by folks who really understood my struggles. And I think I didn't even leave rehab with the intention of necessarily staying clean. I think I left rehab with the intention of, oh, I don't want to mess this up. I want to keep feeling good. And so it's more like what they say about one day at a time is just so true. It's like I wake up every morning and make a conscious decision to keep feeling good. And it's worked so far. I mean, 7.5 years later, it's worked. And I've had, sadness, of course, and I've had, moments of feeling adjacent to those depression type feelings. But I think sobriety is enough of a foundation that I am able to utilize the other tools that I wasn't utilizing before in terms of therapy, in terms of self-care, in terms of community. And so it's just been such a gift. It's like a giant sigh of relief and truly just a privilege to experience life from this vantage point. I genuinely never thought I would. I didn't know it was possible.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing all that and being so transparent and honest, right? I mean, that's how it works when we show up and then share so honestly about our stories with the world. Um, it makes a big impact, right? We remind ourselves kind of where we came from, not to wallow or to toot our own horn or, any of that, but to remember. It's important to remember where we came from and then also to just kind of I think relish in the journey, right? In the process, being able to look through and be like, wow, there are parts that are kind of messy and yucky in the middle and stuff, but there are many things that are just so great and so much joy and so much change. Um, when we look back on that, it gives us the opportunity to do that. And
Yeah.
that's why it works like that. And so thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love how you shared basically what I thought about when you were sharing earlier on was, the drugs and alcohol were the glue that were keeping you together.
Mhm.
Like that's the words that I heard, when I was young too. And I related to that. I was
Mhm.
like, I knew I had problems. I went to the therapist. I lied. We never
Yeah.
really talked about it. Never even asked me really. I don't think that much. And then it was real surprised by when my husband called and said she's in the hospital because she tried to kill herself. And he was like, oh,
Oof.
what
Yeah.
happened? Like what? Yeah, because you don't tell your therapist the truth, it's really hard to get better.
Right.
But I knew it was crazy, but I just didn't think alcohol had anything to do with it. I
Right.
really
I didn't
truly
want to
thought it
believe
was.
it. Of course.
I thought it was the glue that was keeping me together. And it's so interesting how that is such a common theme from
Mhm.
people when you talk to them who are like newcomers or whatever. Um, and also just that concept around, I guess it's stigma or just perception about what we think addiction is. Yes, we think it looks like the guy with the brown paper bag under the, highway or the
Mhm.
addict doing the lean, on those videos from Philadelphia or whatever, or like, you know, the mom, taking pills in her closet, I mean, and like all of those things can be true and that's fine, but there's a lot of ways it shows up. And
Mhm.
I was told early on too by a very wise person when I was in rehab that said, if alcohol or drugs are causing problems in your life, then it's a problem,
Right.
and I was
Right.
like, Oh, because like normal drinkers don't end up in rehab.
Right.
Right.
I was telling someone recently that I almost felt this imposter syndrome around my addiction. Like my
Hmm.
rock bottom wasn't low enough to be
Hmm.
here. And then I tell people my rock bottom story, and they're like, oh, it sounds like you were really suffering. And so to almost accept the fact that I was suffering, that my life caused me a lot of pain, and that I deserved to be well. Like that was a whole other piece of it. Cause, I come from a pretty privileged background. I haven't had, many external struggles in my life. It all came from within. This sort of my own mind was my enemy. And it was a really, really cruel existence to live with. But I was almost unwilling to accept that was real pain, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. And then meeting everyone else who's struggled like me, it's like, yeah, nobody deserves to go through life with their own mind being their greatest
Hmm.
enemy, with their own mind just abusing them day in and day out, reminding them why they're not good enough.
You're so right. Nobody does. And like, yet we can convince ourselves, right? And then go
Mm,
down the line further, down the line where we're like, oh, I'm actually fine. It's fine. I can still do this, or I'm
mhm,
still doing that, or I'm not as bad as this person.
right.
And so yeah, we get that imposter syndrome of like, oh, it wasn't that bad. I remember when I got sober and I said to my sponsor, well, I don't really have much on my list, like my four-step
Mhm.
list. And I was like,
Oh
there's
yeah,
really not.
mine's she was like
Like
pulling
there's
teeth.
not that much here. I was like, and she's like, okay. She's like, that's fine. But what you have is kind of a lot.
Right.
It's
She's
like
like,
kind of
maybe
a
more.
big deal. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, okay. And that helped, because you're like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, it doesn't have to look like somebody else, but we could easily get there too, right? Like there's a big
Mhm.
book story that says, like I stopped in time,
Right.
because like how bad did we want it to get?
Right.
So very quickly you could be like, oh, well, now you do have,
Right.
a DUI, or oops, now you lost your job, so you just keep
Yeah.
going and then you'll end up in those places. But
Mhm.
it's easy to compare out. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's the feelings that we have to stick to.
Mhm.
I always tell people you got to get in those rooms and listen to the feelings. It might be all
Mhm.
old men in there. You're
Right,
the only woman and but you can hear desperation. You
right,
can hear pain and you can be like, "Oh, I
right.
know what that feels like." You
Right,
know.
right. When I teach storytelling workshops, I talk about how most stories are universal. It's the
Yeah.
details of the plot that are
Yeah.
different. And I have loved being in those rooms because it's been this universal sort of community, this universal
Mm.
shared form of existence and almost companionship with folks who I never could have imagined I would have things in common with. And I think, yeah, even if our details are different, our stories are pretty universal.
You just made me think about, because we talked a little bit before we got on about community and belonging, and obviously that is, or maybe it's
Mhm,
not obvious, but it is a definite factor for people who
mhm,
struggle with mental health in general and or addiction, whatever your thing is. A lot of that is going to come from kind of a lack of belonging to
mhm,
something, whether it's, a part of your family or in your community or at your job, like where you don't really feel connected
mhm,
to anything. I don't fit in, or I don't belong anywhere. And I think
mhm,
that is to me, I feel like that's a universal feeling for people who struggle with mental health and addiction, either or both. But also at the same time, while I was listening to you share about like the jungle and other spaces, that community and belonging piece can come from places that aren't good for you.
mhm,
So they're not always good, I guess. I mean,
mhm.
but
Yeah,
it's good at the time. Like you're like, oh yeah, I fit in here. Like these people want me. Like, oh yeah, you're hanging out with a bunch of drug addicts in the trap house, but like but you belong there. But so the
right.
feeling of like connection with humans, and I don't know, I just had this like strong feeling about like how that is still it's not always, oh, we belong and we feel yes, but like it can still be a hurtful experience. I don't know if you can relate to that.
Big time. I mean, how many best friends for 24 hours have you made on a bender that you never see again? And the only thing you have in common is searching for more drugs and pounding the night until it turns into daytime again. I mean, that was so much of my partying, is these like fleeting, flimsy connections. I think what's interesting for me is that I felt so isolated in my self hate, and I felt like I couldn't bond with anyone else who really understood my pain. But on the outside, my belonging looked almost enviable. I mean, I came of age pretty socially adept. I was like a ringleader in elementary school. I mentioned summer camp, and my high school experience was really close knit, and same with college. And even, I kind of always had friends and never believed I had friends, if that makes sense. I had two loving parents. I mean, it's really nuts that really it was my mind isolating me from all those people. And I think one of the best gifts of getting sober was that I'm finally able to cash in on all these incredible relationships I've spent my entire life cultivating. And now it's like, oh, these are real. I get to enjoy them. It was so funny how my brain would always tell me I was all alone. I had no friends, but I'd be sitting in a room full of friends who loved me. And it wasn't even, flimsy friendships. It was just, I would not allow myself to believe it. And I would not allow myself to be kind of authentically loved by these people. And I think forming these real bonds in recovery with other folks who have struggled like me has allowed me to strengthen my bonds with other folks who are not in that world, who didn't really understand my depression and my pain, if that makes sense. I've never really phrased it that way, but it's a fun realization to come to right now as I'm talking to you. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think it's really important and kind of like it drives home the point that we were making before about how there isn't the need isn't about sameness,
Mm,
like we're women or we're the same age or we come from the same background or we're the same, it's not,
mhm,
it's the need isn't in that. It's really in a feeling state, which
mhm,
is, I mean, it's not hard for me to talk about
mhm,
but like it's a hard thing for like I think regular people who maybe aren't mental health professionals to talk about because it's uncomfortable, and then it might be just really new, or maybe it wasn't really something that was available to them, or it wasn't accessible to them, or it was shut down, like maybe when they were growing up or something. And so to allow yourself to be in spaces where really maybe potentially everybody is very different, in the room, yet you have this one commonality. I mean, this is why support groups work, right? Like if you have a chronic illness, and you're really struggling and like you go to a support group, I mean, that's essentially what 12 step is, or any recovery group, like where people have this thing in common. They may not have anything else in common, but you can
right.
all relate to the feeling state of this thing. And
Yeah.
so I think what you just said drives home that point and why it's kind of critical to find that, because you said, even when you're sitting in a room full of people who do deeply love you, but like the internal state of
Mhm.
yourself and
Yeah.
like your view of yourself as an individual of like, being not good enough or just, stupid or whatever, not thin enough, not pretty enough, whatever else, can like really literally remove you from the room,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
how you can feel lonely in spaces full of people who love you and how you are not able to receive any of
mhm,
that
mhm.
positivity. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
I was alone in my head for many, many, many years. People would be like, "Carly, where'd you go?" And it was so clear I was zoning out and ruminating, and yeah,
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
not a fun habit.
And so over the last few years, kind of in this last, couple years of recovery work, because we're never really done, right? We never arrive. We're always a work in progress, kind of working on our own personal development and mental health and social development, all of the things. What has been like the thing for you? Like, what has been the go-to strategy to kind of take? Because, there's some definite markers, or at least they say, in sobriety, there's like that first 5 years, definitely like 10. And then I was having a conversation with another woman, I think it was last week, and she's actually a little bit more sober than me. She was coming up on like 30 years, I think, and she was talking about like the concept of long-term recovery, which it was funny because I always wondered, like, what does that really mean? Like, when is long-term recovery? But she was saying like that 15 to 20 year mark is
Mm,
so dramatically different.
mm,
And then the way our conversation went and the kind of the things that we were both sharing about that really made sense to me. And I was like, oh, okay. It's like a long-term recovery thing. And I'm like, oh. So anyway, there are some definite kind of like markers around, through that process. I'm kind of curious over the last few years, like what's been the go-to strategy for you, or like the tool or the thing that's really working?
That's a great question because I have admittedly drifted from the 12 step world. I'm
Mhm.
not one of those people who quote unquote needs several meetings or even one meeting a week to
Mhm.
stay sober. I don't consider myself dry either. I do think I have a really active spiritual sober practice that just isn't necessarily adhering to the rules that our forefathers invented in the 1930s.
Sure.
But I think as you nobody's ever asked me that before, and I was thinking as you asked me that, I think maintaining radical honesty and self-awareness, but then sharing that externally with my community, which in turn strengthens the authenticity of my community. I don't shove down feelings of sadness. I don't shove down feelings of anger. I really let myself feel
Mhm.
them and try to understand them and talk
Mhm.
about them. And if I'm feeling, if I can't get out of bed for a day, I let people know. It was really interesting as I started embarking on promoting this book. I started having these really strong relapse dreams, and I have not had a relapse dream in years. And they all looked the same. It wasn't that I fell off the wagon and went on a bender and went crazy. It was that I just started quietly like drinking a little bit and then telling myself that I wasn't drinking and telling everyone around me that I wasn't and that it didn't count. And I'd wake up in this cold sweat being like, oh my gosh, I'm a fraud. And and alongside that, I had my first alcohol craving in like 6 or 7 years. And it was at a dinner party that a friend was hosting where people were drinking wine and really enjoying themselves. And, since getting clean, I've never really craved it because the feeling good has so outweighed any of my past behaviors that it's like almost like a moot point. And I was just like, damn, I really wish I could have a glass of wine right now. I started to get angry. I was like, this is so unfair that all these people can have a blast. And I am the only one drinking sparkling water while they're
Mhm.
tasting all these wines, enjoying their night, laughing, loosening up. And so what I did was I texted, 5 different alcoholics I knew in my phone and was like, I'm craving booze for the first time and said, this is so strange, so humbling to know that there is no
Mhm.
cure, it's a lifelong practice. And I told my friend who had thrown the party, and she's like, no questions asked, take my car keys, go home, because I was visiting her in another city. And I think that, and then I knew I needed to go to a meeting, so I went to a meeting, and I went to a meeting in a town across. I live in San Francisco. I went to a meeting in Oakland because I didn't want to see anyone I knew. I just wanted to share about this whole experience. And the relapse dream stopped after that, but it was a really humbling reminder of like, this is not something that just gets better and goes away. And I think if I didn't have that community and I didn't have that radical honesty and self-awareness of, hey, these are some alarm bells going off. This is not a good thing to be thinking. Then I wonder, if it could have gotten much worse. And so I also really, I maintain that with my therapist, who I still see, same one who helped me get sober
Mhm.
to begin with. And I just try to know when I really need to plug into that world, and I
Mhm.
try to really accept all versions of my feelings. I think I say that my feelings in sobriety are like technicolor because even the sadness was numbed when I was, partying hard, and now I feel the sadness as for what it really is.
Mhm.
And that's a gift too, the full spectrum of emotions is a gift. So yeah, if that makes sense as a tool, if that counts, then that's the tool I'm gonna pick to share.
Absolutely, it makes sense. And I'm so thankful that you did say it exactly that way because what I heard you say too was that you focused on radical honesty, which is incredibly powerful. Nobody really likes doing that. It's not like we're like, oh, we love digging deep and asking ourselves good questions. What are we afraid of? And like, why is this bothering me? Nobody really likes to do that. Okay. Like, that's not the point of it. But the point of it is to keep yourself accountable to yourself. Like, because no one else is going to do it. Like no one else is in your head, right? So the dreams were like, and I'm not, whatever. Like I'm not a scientist or I'm not going to existentialize it or whatever, but like they were a signal. They were a
Mhm.
signal to you. And whatever that reason was that it came in that way, that's the way it chose to come to you. Like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, like, hey, you need to look at this. And also, I think being able to name those emotions and actually allow yourself to feel them and experience it is extremely important too. And again, lots of people do not like, who wants to be like, I feel sad and angry? Like, who likes that? Most people don't. Um, And I mean, I'm so glad that you shared that, and I've shared this story many times too. But when I was 10 years sober, I was still very heavily involved, and I was celebrating my anniversary, and I stood in the front of that room, and I was pissed. I
Mm.
was pissed that I was still having to do this. Why am I still doing this? And it's still like this, and it's still hard. And I was like, damn, that's like actually not how it's but I remember it so well and thinking like that's just where I was at that time. But I think actually it's a huge amount of growth, right? To be able to get to that place to say like, yeah, this life is hard. You know, I was
Mhm.
doing a lot of things. I had a lot of kids. I was running around. I was trying to do the things, and it's takes a lot of energy. And like I couldn't use alcohol as my tool. And you're right, everybody else was doing that, you know, and I had to come up with other ways, and it was annoying.
Mhm.
But I think that being able to verbalize that and own it and say like that's what I was feeling and not be ashamed of it, you know, not be able to just because you're standing in a room with other alcoholics or in your therapist's office or wherever, be able to say, yeah, I'm really pissed off at you. You know, I don't like it when you tell me the truth or, you know, whatever it is that's coming up. And so I really, really, really appreciate you being able to verbalize that here because I know a lot of other people know what that is. Like it's true, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, the shame is real, and that's and it still comes up. I mean, it minimizes when you mention it, but you know, what's been really fun in sobriety is facing all my other issues that I haven't resolved yet with an you know with a much more honest disposition. It's
yeah.
like sometimes I forget, you know, and I'm just walking through my life like all hoity-toity, like I fixed my depression, it's over, and then something that has been a really, really, really bad tendency since I was really, really young, comes rearing its head back. Like choosing the
Yes.
wrong man is the
Yeah.
perfect example. My really bad, you know, dating judgment. And it's like, man, this is not solved. This is a lifelong thing. This is just my addiction showing up in other ways. And you know, maybe I'm not better, maybe I'm not different, but maybe I'm better at accepting it. And maybe I'm better at holding space for it. And maybe I'm better at walking away from bad situations, even if I haven't figured out how to prevent
Mhm.
those situations from happening in the first place,
Yes.
if that makes sense.
No, totally. I mean, I always say, and I just said it to a client this morning, like what we're looking for in change, and I think you are better. What we're looking for is and to measure progress is that the frequency and the duration of things is less, so that
Mm-hmm.
the incidents or the situations are happening less often, and the
Mm-hmm.
length of time that they last is less. So
Right.
when we can look back and say, "Oh, wow, it's been like 6 months since I've like." Done
Mm-hmm.
that. Or it's been 2 years since I, you know, allowed that kind of behavior. You know, like so we're not we have to mark our progress and be able to say, like, no, actually, that's way better, you know, when
Mm-hmm.
this used to be happening every week, you know. But we're the last to know, you know, so we have to rely on other people saying to us, you seem really different, or wow, like I've
Yeah.
noticed you really, you know, you're really much more peaceful, or you're smiling a lot, or
Right.
like and the humility that comes from having like an alcohol craving is
Mm-hmm.
insane. And actually, it's a real blessing. You mentioned the spiritual program before, and I'm glad that you did because I do think those are like the spiritual awakenings that we get to have today. We get to have that when we are open-minded to it. I have a client I've been working with for a super long time, very chronic relapser, decades long chronic relapse, very painful to watch. I actually had a hard time last year. I was almost like
Mm-hmm.
I don't I don't really know. I kind of got to the end where I've never had to like refer someone out or like
Yeah.
and you know but I was to the point where I was starting to feel like there's just nothing else I can say. I said to him when he came in at the end, he was really defeated and he had gotten like had a legal situation and we sat here and we just like looked at each other and I was like I don't have anything else to say. And he's like,
Yeah.
I know. He knew like there was
Mm-hmm.
like the communication between us was basically like we've done it all right and so but now he has racked up together kind of a little bit of time more than he's ever had a few months or whatever and just came in last week and was experiencing you know like a lot of that anxiety he was having before he was like oh my gosh I don't understand what's going on and blah 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 and so we talked about it a little bit and you know it doesn't take long you just ask some of the right questions and you know kind of dig in a little and quickly we learn well, because I was like, well, what's different? You know, like what's different now? What were you doing before that was working or helping with that? And what's different? And quickly you can discover the things that have changed, you know? Well, you know, I was praying every morning. And that's what I was just getting up and I was just doing that every day. But it's been a while since I've done that. And I
Mhm.
was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. And there was like something, and I'm like, I feel like you've kind of just like highlighted the
Mhm.
solution, right? Like, so the humility that came to him from having this kind of like same feelings from before was extremely scary, and I'm glad, but then also was able to lead him back to the path that you need to be on. It's just like a reminder of like you don't get to just, and it's not even just like about drinking or anything, it's about anything, right? You don't get to just step off the path that was
Mhm.
working and expect that you're just going to carry on. The humility comes when you realize, oh no, this is like an everyday kind of the rest of your life walk, right? When you have to think about the partners you choose and who do you engage with and like what kind of engagement do you have, and I'm just making this up, I don't know. But like, you have to decide that,
Mhm.
and if you slip back and you start talking in a way that you normally used to talk, and then you start getting the same kind of results you used to get, and then you're like, oh crap, that's where that humility like brings you to your knees and like, oh, actually, no, I have to do this every day. I have to do this.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I love about the rooms, the 12-step rooms, is that they're always available. And it's like my tried and true old friend.
Right.
So even if it's been a year, I can go in, everyone will clap for me. I can say the worst things I've ever done. Everyone will clap for me. I'll get a standing ovation. And it's like, um, it's just really nice to speak that language and to be able to drop in and sort of use it in a way that works for me, even if I'm not necessarily doing it the way that others who talk about their own program are doing it. And I think another thing that I thought of while you were talking just now is I think in the past, when I would repeat my mistakes or when I would see behaviors come through that I had worked so hard on that were just
Mhm.
still there, I would focus on this sort of shame spiral of like, oh no, I'm always this, I'm always that. And one thing that's shifted for me in sobriety is giving myself credit for those incremental changes. So, like,
Yes.
maybe I still choose a bad relationship, but this time I walk away in 2 months instead of 2 years. And
Exactly.
that to me is so much more worth focusing on than like, while I'm still doing this, choosing the
Exactly.
wrong people thing.
That's exactly what I meant by that with the frequency
Mhm.
and duration. Sure. Are we human? Yes. Are we going to eat the ice cream sometimes when we said we weren't going to eat ice cream anymore? Yeah, we're going to
Mhm.
mess up, but it doesn't mean we derail our whole lives and you're like, oh, well, now I'm just going to eat ice cream every single day. No,
Right.
you just step back
Right.
in. Okay, well, tomorrow I'm not going to eat ice cream. Like that's exactly what I meant. Like, you realize, oh, I only lasted for 2 months this time.
Mhm.
What an amazing opportunity. The frequency and duration were less.
Mhm.
I used to
Yeah.
say, I say a lot, I'm the mistake maker in our family. I'm the one that always like, scratches up my car, crashes, gets tickets, forgets stuff, like that's me. My husband is perfect and I'm the mistake maker. And so I would do, in my younger years for many, many decades, frankly, in that state, I was very unwell and focused constantly on the negative parts, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not, oh, I'm this, I'm that. And it took a lot of undoing, rewiring to get to that space to be able to say, yeah, I did forget that such and such, the picture form for preschool, but I did like 100 things really well today.
Mhm.
Here's the
Exactly.
1,000 things that I did well, and I just didn't do this one thing.
Isn't it crazy how your brain can just choose to appreciate yourself or not based on whatever input you decide to focus on?
Right. And that's not rocket science. That's actually very simple, but it's amazing how long, for me
Yeah,
anyway, that it took me to get to the space to be able to even do that.
absolutely.
And now I can
Yes.
do it just all the time, regular. And
It's
it's
like fully
amazing.
rewiring to be able to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Carly, for your time
Oh,
and for your book and for your story. I'd love to hear where you like people to reach out. Like if people want to get a hold of you or find you, where do you want them to do that?
yeah, absolutely. They can reach me on Instagram at Carlicita, Carlicita. Thank you, former AOL Instant Messenger name, which is now an Instagram name. And also my website, carly.ink, like Carly Inc., has my book, has my workshops, has some writing, coaching, consulting opportunities. So hopefully all the good stuff is there. You can email me directly through the website as well.
Okay, wonderful. I'll make sure that's all linked below. And again, thank you so
Yeah,
much for your time. And I hope that
that's
our paths cross again soon.
Would love that. It's always such a gift to connect and reflect with someone who fully gets it. And I just found myself nodding along through this entire conversation. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for featuring these stories. Thank you for helping people the way you do and, using your own experience as a means for good. It's